On today's show, I am breaking down the bargain bin options for the Rangers. Should they take a look at Cody Bellinger? Should they take a look at Michael Brantley? And some other potential options for the Texas Rangers. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan since 2010, the founder and host for all 4 seasons of this Locked On Rangers podcast. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers and subscribe on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment any single thing below. On today's show, I am breaking down a kind of Cyber Monday, a day delayed. I did a crossover with Sully yesterday that I was not anticipating, was going to make this my Monday episode, but when Sully offered me a chance to talk about Joey Gallo, I pretty much pounced on that chance. So we're going to look in the bargain bin for the Rangers, getting some deals. They're going to probably spend a lot of money on free agents in the starting pitching department. Probably not as much money left over for a bat, but they have said they wanted to add one bat. A recent report came out from, I believe it was Ken Rosenthal, that said the Rangers are more confident that they are going to land Carlos Rodon than Jacob deGrom. I kind of felt like that might end up being the way the Rangers went. More teams would be willing to give, something in the absurd, like 2 years for $50 million a year. I think that's what it might end up getting him, as opposed to the Rangers, who might be willing to go 4 years, but not quite as high on the average annual value. And I think the Rangers are much more likely than any other team to go and give that 5-year deal to Carlos Rodon, maybe even 6. I think 5 would get the deal done, though. But we are not talking about those guys. We are talking about the bargain bin, the buy low options. And the best buy low option on the market right now is former Dodgers outfielder, former MVP Cody Bellinger, who was non-tendered by the Dodgers after making around $17 million last year and just was not flat out not good. He won an MVP and since then has been just completely down the drain. A 2-time All-Star, an MVP back in 2019, a Rookie of the Year, finished top 10 MVP voting that year, and since then has not really done a whole lot of anything. That year he won an MVP. He was a Gold Glover. He was a Silver Slugger. He was an All-Star. He just had the trifecta of awards. He was absolutely phenomenal that year. He hit 47 home runs, 34 doubles, hit 305 with a 1,035 OPS while playing Gold Glove level defense that season at a bunch of different positions, but mostly center field. Played first base, right field, a little bit of left. Actually, no left field that year, but just right, center, and first base, but was primarily a center fielder and has been a really, really good defensive center fielder. That's where the value is still present, but it was not $18 million worth of present, which was about what he was going to make this year. The Dodgers said, yeah, no thanks. We are out on you until you figure out how to hit baseballs like you used to. And flat out, he just hasn't for many years. Since 2020, he had a fine year that year. Probably would have been an All-Star on reputation coming off of his, MVP season and being a Dodger. That year was fine. He had a 789 OPS, 12 home runs in the shortened season. It was okay, but it wasn't quite Cody Bellinger. And the last 2 years have been just horrendous for him. Last year was not as bad as the year before in 2021. In 2021, he had 95 games with a 542 OPS, hit 165, an on-base of 240, and slugged just 302. Just 302 in 95 games. Was hurt a little bit, missed some time, and was just straight up bad. Kind of did not fit the Dodgers standards. This year, he was also not great. Played 144 games this year, hit 19 home runs, but hit just 210 on base, under 300 at 265, slugging under 400 at 389. Not what you want from your MVP level guy. He did have 27 doubles and 3 triples, but it wasn't enough. He played exclusively DH and center field, primarily center field this year. Was still fantastic defensively, still a very, very fast player. He's going to be 27 next year and still theoretically has a lot of time on his hands, but is he worth the gamble? I mean, if the Dodgers couldn't fix this guy, the freaking Dodgers, the team that fixes everybody, turned Tyler Anderson into the freaking amazing, their number one starter last year, and ended up getting a 3-year, $39 million deal with the Angels after being pretty average for almost the entirety of his career. This is the Dodgers, and they fixed just about everything and everyone that comes to them. They didn't quite do it with Joey Gallo. Maybe their reclamation energy was being spent. They spent all their points on pitching reclamation projects this year and didn't have enough to, turn over some hitters that probably still have plenty left in the tank, like Joey Gallo and like Cody Bellinger. But maybe it's a time for a change of scenery for Cody Bellinger, even if, the Dodgers are the best place for him to be. Maybe going somewhere else is just what he needs, even if the best coaching and, environment and stuff might be in LA. If LA is where the problems have been, maybe just getting out of there might be what helps him fix these problems. But the Rangers have one of the best hitting coaching staffs on the planet right now, with Tim Hires as their hitting coach and Donnie Ecker as their bench coach / offensive coordinator. The guys did a great job turning around Nathaniel Lowe, making him, who was already a pretty decent offensive first baseman, into the best offensive first baseman in the American League this year. And they fixed him, making him be able to hit fastballs. One of the things that has kind of plagued Cody Bellinger in the last couple of years is his bat speed falling off. Now, there's a few questions as to how something like that gets fixed. Is it, once that's gone, he is done forever and can't get it back? I don't think so at his age. If he was a little bit older, that's one of the things that once that starts to go, hitters kind of start to lose their ability to make up for reading pitches poorly or not recognizing them as well. When you have elite bat speed, it lets you sit on things for a little bit faster, for a little bit longer, so you have more margin for error, if that makes sense. And Bellinger had elite bat speed, which is why he was able to hit 305 that year he won his MVP and have an on base over 400. He has had the 3.46 season. 3.45 for me is the pinnacle, the mark of elite overall offensive player, hitting 300 on base, over 400, and slugging over 500. He did it 3.46 and 3.4629. That is a phenomenal season. It was kind of not quite what Judge was putting up this year, but kind of on par for what Judge has done about for his career. Coming up, we're going to look a little bit into why the Rangers should take a chance on him and some other buy low bats and potential trade options as well. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer and esports, we've got it all at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get in your betting fix. If you are betting on the Rangers to have an MVP on their team this year, I don't know if they have those lines up for MVP just yet, but if there are some lines for where Cody Bellinger lands, we should go check those out. I know there are lines on where Aaron Judge lands. I think there might be some on DeGrom and Rodon, depending on some different things. But head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more, because BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Now, Cody Bellinger is definitely the best buy low player on the market right now. I know my own personal feelings aside with Joey Gallo. I would love to see Joey Gallo back. I think there's a bigger likelihood that Joey Gallo bounces back, but Joey Gallo's peak was not MVP level. It was close. That first half, he was probably top 5 consideration of 2019 before he got hurt, when he was hitting like 230 something and had an on base in the 400s and was playing center field. It's kind of Cody Bellinger-esque, but I think that might be where the bounce back season expectation could be for Cody Bellinger. The swing and miss is still way up there. I think he's a better defender than Joey Gallo and better in the outfield. He was in the 92nd percentile of outs above average, in the top 2/3 of outfielder jump and arm strength, and in sprint speed, he was also in the top 2/3. His average exit velocity, so he was hitting the baseball. When he was hitting it pretty hard, but he wasn't barreling it up all that much. Was in the top half barrel percentage, but the whiff rate, chase rate walk rate, all of those, and the strikeout rate were way down from what he had been in the past. If the Rangers went out and got this guy and had the guy that he was last year, that was a decent player, not great, a 1.2 WAR player in the outfield. Maybe it would have been a little bit better than what Leody Taveras was providing. Leody is a little bit better defensively than him. If the Rangers did get him, I do think that Cody Bellinger would slot into left field, assuming they didn't sign somebody else to play the outfield as well. If they did, then Bellinger takes over center field, Leody goes to the bench, and who knows what happens to Bubba Thompson and the other guys in left field. But I think a 1-year prove-it deal makes sense for Bellinger. It also makes a lot of sense for Gallo. Other guys, I talked about them before. Adam Duvall, who's 33 years old, coming off a season where he had an OPS below 700, but still had 12 home runs. Played a lot of center field defense. I think would be a better fit in left field, somewhere in the 1-year, $7 million range. I think would be fine. I think that'd be an improvement on what the Rangers have in left field right now. AJ Pollock is 35, coming off a 14 homer season with an OPS, again, below 700, but he is only 1 year removed from an 892 OPS with the Dodgers. And, I think somewhere in the 1 year, maybe 2 years, $20 million range might get him. I don't know. But I think that guy is also worthy of a reclamation flyer. Did not have a great year with the White Sox. Then again, not a whole lot of people did, except for Jose Abreu, who unfortunately signed a 3-year deal with the Houston Astros. Real bummer the Chicago White Sox couldn't retain him, and even more a bummer that he went to the freaking Astros. Speaking of the Astros, there is a former Astros player who I think the Rangers might want to take a little bit of a flyer on. I didn't think that the Astros were going to let him leave, but it seems pretty clear that they are not really prioritizing him, and that is Michael Brantley, the left fielder. Last year was not a great year for him, missed a decent amount of time with a shoulder injury last season at age 35, did not make an all-star team last year, but did in 2021. That year he had a 799 OPS, hit over 300, on base 362, 8 home runs for him that year. This past year, 64 games. Because of that missed time, the power is way down, but the on base, the turning the lineup over, and I think that's something the Rangers could use in their kind of 5, 6, 7 hole hitter range. They have some guys who hit for a lot of power, don't get on base a whole lot in, Adolis Garcia, and I think Mitch Garver kind of also falls into that category as well. Both of them do a great job of, smacking the occasional big home run, but for a guy to kind of try and turn the lineup over, I think that is somewhere that Michael Brantley could definitely provide some value. Not sure how much outfield he'd be playing versus DH, but I think he could provide a decent amount of value. Somewhere in the 1 year, $8 million range might be enough to acquire the services of Michael Brantley. I don't think there's going to be a huge market for him, but I really like what I've seen from him in Houston, and provide a different kind of look. If you watch much of the ALCS, that was something that the Yankees lineup really struggled with, is kind of turning it over. They had a bunch of all or nothing guys, and that's kind of similar to the middle third of the Rangers order, and let's be honest, a little bit in the bottom third as well, except not as much of the all in terms of hitting home runs in the bottom third of this lineup. But I think Michael Brantley could provide a lot of value, give you some depth, give you some great at-bats, and I think that is where his value would definitely be. If they had to go for a 2-year, $16 million deal, I think that would definitely be worth it, because with Aaron Zavala missing some time, I think he's most likely to be the Rangers left fielder of the future, and who knows, Brantley might end up being more of a DH these days anyway, so maybe we could see a little bit of time there. He did play a little bit more DH this year with Yordan Alvarez playing in the outfield, so maybe he is just a DH at this point, but the Rangers don't have an everyday DH, and I think even though you'd probably like to see a little bit more power hitter numbers out of your DH, I think someone with a 360-ish on base with a slugging percentage around what he has been for his career in the 400s-ish range. Yeah, 416 last year, still providing a little bit of doubles power, projected for 21 doubles and 8 home runs and 2 triples. Next year, a 771 OPS, which I think would be fine. I think it'd be just fine. Maybe if he played a few more games, he'd up those numbers a little bit, get homers into the double digits, because if you're a primary DH, you probably want a little bit more power, but he's never really been a big power guy. His His record for home runs in his career in a single season was 22 back in 2019, his first season in Houston. So really never been a big power guy. Only had one more 20-plus homer season in his career. That was back in 2014. But a consummate hitter, I think, could definitely provide a lot of value for the Texas Rangers in their lineup as long as they are not giving him too big a contract. And I really don't think it would take that big of a deal. But I still do think that Cody Bellinger is the best buy low bid on the market. Personally, obviously, Joey Gallo is my preference. And I think both of those guys, actually, really all of these left-handers, so Adam Duvall excluded, but the rest of these guys on this list would all benefit a great deal from the shift being banned. I mean, if Michael Brantley is hitting, 311 like he did in 2021 with the Astros with the shift. Imagine if he's going to hit like 350 or something when the shift is banned. I think all of those guys could be due for a resurgent year. Could be just a great year for left-handed hitters with the shift being banned. I think all these guys could definitely be guys who benefit from that rule change. Coming up, we're going to look at some of the pitchers on the free agent market and a couple of trade options the Rangers might want to look at in terms of buy low options. But first, this word from our sponsors. So when you look at the free agent market, there are a few of these guys who have been picked up already. But I think that the ones the Rangers should be looking at if they are not able to trade for another starting pitcher, again, I do think they need two starting pitchers, one of those hopefully at the top end of the free agent market, whether that's Rodon, DeGrom, or even Verlander. I think those are the best options that are out there, and the Rangers should go and get one of them. But if the Rangers decide to trade for one of their number one options, if they decide to go for one of the Brewers' top guys, or for some reason the Marlins cave and accept offers on Sandy Alcantara, which I don't think they will, but the Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodruff trades are definitely available to be made. And if the Rangers don't spend at the top of the market and just go for one of those guys as their top end guy, I do think they could still go for a Rodon and make one of these trades for Burns or Woodruff. But if the Rangers do sign Rodon to a big deal and they're wanting to go a little bit on the cheaper end in terms of prospect capital of what it would cost to get another starting pitcher in there, but still provide a decent amount of value, there are a few options that they can go with, and I think most of them are on the Braves. The Braves have done a really good job of developing starting pitching, and there are a couple of guys which I know as soon as I say this, as soon as I started rationalizing this to myself, I kind of started thinking of Colby Allard, of these young guys who, jumped up to the big leagues and never really got any better. It's just him. There are a couple other guys who jumped up to the big leagues, kind of struggled, and then got better. But I think these guys definitely have a lot of potential. This one at the top of my list is coming off his age 24 season and a 5.00 ERA in 111 innings. That is right-handed pitcher Ian Anderson. He won the World Series with the Braves, was a pretty big part of their rotation that year. They had a lot of injuries, but he was able to get them to the promised land. In 2021, pitched 128 innings with 124 strikeouts and a 3.58 ERA. He wouldn't be cheap, and the Rangers might have to give up. If they were looking at getting a guy in the upper levels of the Braves rotation, I think Adolis Garcia is a guy the Braves could have their eye on, but I don't think that Ian Anderson is up there. They have so many other starting pitchers, such a deep rotation, and not a whole lot of needs. I mean, he was their number 5 player in their rotation this year, probably going to be even lower next year. I mean, they had Max Fried, Kyle Wright, Charlie Morton, and Spencer Strider all ahead of him, all absolutely crushing it. Jake Odorizzi was pushed out a little bit by Ian Anderson. The Rangers have him as well. But there are some other young guys that I think on the Braves that could make a little bit of sense. Another one is Kyle Muller, a left-handed pitcher from Dallas, Texas. I looked at him a little bit at the trade deadline for maybe a guy who the Rangers trade for. He went to Jesuit High School college preparatory school in Dallas. So he is a Dallas kid, born and raised, a former second-round pick out of that high school. This year was not a great year, only pitched in 3 games at the big league level, had an ERA over 8 in 12 innings. Year before, he had 9 games, 8 of those were starts, 36 and 2/3 innings, more strikeouts than innings pitched. Also had a bit of a walk problem, just a little bit, and an ERA just north of 4 at 4.17. He is going to be 25 next year. I think the Rangers could take a little bit of a flyer on him. Not sure what the cost of acquiring a guy like him might be. Maybe some late inning bullpen prospects, or I don't know. I honestly have no idea what the cost would be. But I think that's a guy who definitely the Rangers could make a look at and possibly target. In terms of free agents, though, there are a few guys that I want the Rangers to keep an eye on. Sean Manaea is probably at the highest end of this list in terms of what he would cost. He might end up getting a 3-year deal, but it was a rough go of it for him when he went to the San Diego Padres this year. Has shown to be a pretty reliable middle of the rotation guy. Maybe he slots in as the Rangers number 4. I think in this rotation, that's probably, maybe he'd be at the number 3 at this point. At this point, I think he'd be the Rangers number 3, maybe just a little bit ahead of Dane Dunning. But coming off a poor season and not a super great showing in the postseason, had some moments, but overall not what the Padres thought they were getting when they traded for him. I think the Rangers could definitely benefit from him seeing a bounce back season. Also, Michael Wacha, a 31-year-old coming off a pretty decent season last year, just over 125 innings, a sub 3.5 ERA, 3.3 B-WAR season, has been an all-star somewhere in the 3-year, $36 million range. Maybe he might command just a little bit more than Manaea. Other guys on this list include Kyle Gibson, who is getting some interest from the Pirates, coming off 162 innings pitched with a ERA just 5.05 last year. Not super great, kind of lost a spot in the rotation for the playoffs, but provided some value pitching in some big situations for the Phillies. I don't see the Rangers making as deep a run as the Phillies this year, so that might be less of a problem, but definitely a guy you could look at a 1-year deal. Loved it in Texas. Texas loved him, but the Rangers were just bad, and they needed to capitalize on his value. They didn't. They might not have even done that. They might have even been better off just keeping him on that team because Spencer Howard hasn't exactly provided a whole lot of value for the Texas Rangers since being traded to Texas in that deal. But another guy the Rangers should look at is Wade Miley. Not exactly sure what kind of a deal he would get. He is 36 years old, coming off a season where he had a 3.16 ERA in 37 innings for the Cubs, and had a really, really great year the year before with the Reds, who just let him go for nothing. Don't know why they did that, but that is a guy who, again, if you're on the buy low end, I think he would definitely be available if the Rangers wanted to go out and get him, bolster that rotation, hope that he is healthy, and hope that he can pitch like he has done the last couple of seasons, because he has been fairly effective for 2 teams that not a lot of people were watching. And the last guy on this list is Zach Eflin, a guy who kind of lost his spot in the rotation for the Phillies last year. He's going to be 29, pitched 75 and 2/3 innings with an ERA just north of 4, a 0.9 baseball reference WAR season. I think somewhere in the 2-year, $25 million range would be enough to get him. He is a right-handed pitcher who I think could be in for a decent bounce back season. A guy, if you're going to buy low, still pretty young if you want to get him. It kind of reminds me of the type of deals that the Rangers have done. All of these guys are kind of in that range of guys who have shown promise, have been former top prospects, have fallen on hard times, and the Rangers see something in them that they can fix. That is the one thing they've done extremely well during this lean period with the guys like Lance Lynn, with Mike Minor, with Kyle Gibson, with even Martin Perez this year. I mean, who saw that kind of a season coming for him? But that's what the Rangers have done well, and I think someone in this range could be a likely recipient of that. Maybe Jake Odorizzi is that guy. Maybe it's Odorizzi. They already have him. But I think someone in this kind of grouping of starting pitchers could be someone that the Rangers do pretty well with. Usually those guys are more in the 28 to 32 range when the Rangers start to reclaim them. So maybe Wade Miley and Kyle Gibson are just kind of back-end rotation fillers, which, again, you do need those if you want to be a playoff team, and you need probably more that you need to have at least 7 starting pitchers that are at least back end of the rotation, quality, because injuries happen. Injuries happen a lot. And if the Rangers are signing one of Rodon or DeGrom, you'd want that number to probably be somewhere in the 8-ish range, because, again, as good as those guys are, and John Gray also contributes to this, all those guys have a little bit of injury concerns, and you just want to be sure to shore up your depth. Otherwise, you end up looking like absolute fools and, again, not making that playoff drought end this year, and maybe some dire consequences coming after that. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. And hopefully some of the pitching prospects who had some setbacks last year come in and make this a little bit of a moot point and kind of, fill in the back of that rotation. And the Rangers don't have to worry about Jake Odorizzi and how many starts that he can give them. Maybe Jack Leiter figures things out. Maybe Kumar Rocker figures some things out. Maybe Owen White stays healthy and absolutely dominates. Maybe Cole Reagan figures some things out. Maybe Cole Winn figures out how to throw a strike again. I think he will. But again, those are all questions at this point. So having some of these back-end depth guys, it might not be the sexy move. I mean, it's definitely not the sexy move unless you're bringing in Big Sexy, which, again, he's like 47, I think, at this point. And, well, in the 2021 rotation, I think he might have been better than some of the guys the Rangers were tossing out there. But I do think some of these options, especially the Cody Bellinger move, the Rangers feel confident that there's something in that bat speed they can find MVP level, or 3/4 of MVP level, then that would be a phenomenal buy low for him. And, bring in an old friend of Corey Seager. But that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you all so much for listening and subscribing. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.